Okay, we'll start with some kirtan.
Yes.
Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namini Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyamadi Paschatya Desatarini Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadada Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda da 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 Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Brajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha यशोदनन्दन व्रजनरञ्जन यशोदनन्दन व्रजनरञ्जन यमुनतीरावनचारि यमुनतीरावनचारि जय राधमाधवा कुञ्ज बिहारी जय राधमाधवा कुञ्ज बिहारी हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे जय राधा नील माधव राधे जय राधा नील माधव राधे जय गौरानिताय 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 जय प्रभुपदा 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 जय जय गुरुदेव गुरुदेव जय जय गुरुदेव जय जय गुरुदेव गुरुदेव जय जय गुरुदेव नित्य गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल नित्य गौर हरि बोल नित्य गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल नित्य गौर हरि बोल। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरु श्रीयुतपादकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सगगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्ण चैतन्यदेवं श्री राधा कृष्ण पादान् सगगण ललिता श्री विशाखान्वितंश्च हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधो दीनबंधो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patidanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Welcome to our weekly study of Bhagavad-gita. So we are going to start today the 8th chapter entitled as Attaining the Supreme, or in Sanskrit it is known as Akshara Brahma Yoga. So last week we concluded the 7th chapter. So the connection between the 7th chapter and the 8th chapter is that the last 2 verses of the 7th chapter, Krishna introduced some new terms or terminologies. So those terminologies, those terms, made Arjuna to ask further questions. Arjuna asked some questions. So what are those terms and what is the question? That's what Arjuna is going to ask. Arjuna is going to ask that Krishna, right? You had introduced some terms like Brahman and Adibhuta and all of them. So can you explain me what they are? So he's going to ask, 7 questions, 7 topics, 7 terms. So, and then that's what he's going to ask, what are they? In 8.1 and 8.2, Arjuna asks that question. And then Krishna answers, the 7 of them, sorry, totally 8 items. 8 items. And then 7 of them he answers in verses 8.3 to 8.4. And then the last question, the 7th, 8th question, he is going to elaborate further in the chapter. So this chapter contains 6 sections. Verses 1 to 4 is Lord and Krishna answers Arjuna's question. And then 5 to 8, Krishna talks about how remembering Krishna at the time of death and what will there be the result of it. And then 9th to 13th verse, Krishna talks about, how Yoga Mishra Bhakti, through Yoga Mishra Bhakti, the yogis remember Krishna. And then Krishna talks about the Ananya Bhakti, pure Bhakti, unalloyed devotion. How they can remember the yogis, the Bhakti yogis, how they can remember Krishna. So it is 14 to 16. Then 17 to 22, Krishna talks about material world versus spiritual world. And then 23 to 28, Krishna talks about the supremacy of pure Bhakti in attaining Krishna. So these are the 6 sections this chapter has. So we'll start with verse number 1. Arjuna Uvacha Kim Tat Brahma Kim Adhyatmam Kim Tat Brahma Kim Adhyatmam Kim Karma Purushottama Adibhutam Cha Kim Proktam Adidaivam Kim Uchyate. Word by word meaning. Arjuna Uvacha, Arjuna said, Kim, what, Tat, that, Brahma, Brahman, Kim, what, Adhyatmam, the self, Kim, what, Karma, fruitive activities, Purusha Uttama, O Supreme Person, Adibhutam, the material manifestation cha and kim what proktam is called Adidaivam. The demigods kim what uchyate is called. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivinoda Swami Srila Prabhupada. Arjuna inquired, "O my Lord, O Supreme Person, what is Brahman? What is the self? What are fruitive activities? What is this material manifestation? And what are the demigods? Please explain this to me." So here in this, actually, he is talking about, asking about 5 terms. What is Brahman? What is Adhyatma? And what is Karma? What is this material manifestation, right? Prakriti, right? And then Adibhutam, that is actually. And then Adidaivam. And what are the demigods? These are the 5, terms he is inquiring. Purport. In this chapter, Lord Krishna answers different questions from Arjuna, beginning with what is Brahman. The Lord also explains karma, fruitive activities, devotional service, and yoga principles, and devotional service in its purest, in pure form. The Srimad Bhagavatam explains that the supreme absolute truth is known as Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan, and Bhagavan. In addition, the living entity, the individual soul, is also called Brahman. Arjuna also inquires about Atma, which refers to the body, soul, and mind. According to Vedic dictionary, Atma refers to mind, soul, body, and senses also. Arjuna has addressed the Supreme Lord as Purushottama, Supreme Person, which means that he was putting these questions not simply to a friend, but to the Supreme Person, knowing himself to be the supreme authority able to give definitive answers. So here, this 5 terms is inquiring what they are. And then he is addressing Krishna as Purushottama. Arjuna is addressing Krishna as Purushottama. That very clearly says that he is not just a friend or a relative. He is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he is the supreme authority on answering questions on the spiritual matters. Hence, he put this questions. The Lord will answer these questions in 8.3 onwards. So now we'll go to 8.2. Somebody would like to recite?
Can recite. Adhiyajna katham kotra dehesmin madhusudana prayana kale cha katham jneyosi niyatatmabhihi. I can't see.
You can't see?
No. It's just the prayers before reciting.
Really?
I don't see your screen. I mean, I see your screen, but not the next slide.
Oh, really? Let me see what happened.
I see the slide that says prayers before reciting.
Yeah. I don't know why. You can see now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Adhiyajna, the Lord of sacrifice. Katham, how. Kaha, who. Atra, here. Dehe, in the body. Asmin, this. Madhusudana, O Madhusudana. Prayana Kale, at the bottom, at the time of death. Ko, cha, and. Katham, how. Gneyaha, asi, you can be known niyatatmabhihi, by the self-controlled. Who is the Lord of sacrifice, and how does he live in the body, O Madhusudana? And how can those engaged in devotional service know you at the time of death? Lord of sacrifice may refer to either Indra or Vishnu. Vishnu is the chief of the primal demigods, including Brahma and Shiva, and Indra is the chief of the administrative demigods. Both Indra and Vishnu are worshipped by Yajna performances. But here Arjuna asks, who is actually the Lord of Yajna, that is sacrifice, and how the Lord is residing within the body of the living entity. Arjuna addresses the Lord as Madhusudana because Krishna once killed a demon called Madhu. Actually, these questions, which are of the nature of doubts, should not have arisen in the mind of Arjuna because Arjuna is a Krishna conscious devotee. Therefore, these doubts are like demons. Since Krishna is so expert in killing demons, Arjuna here addresses him as Madhusudana so that Krishna might kill the demonic doubts that arise in Arjuna's mind. Now the word prayana kale in this verse is very significant because whatever we do in life will be tested at the time of death. Arjuna is very anxious to know of those who are constantly engaged in Krishna consciousness. What should be their position at the final moment? At the time of death, all the bodily functions are disrupted and the mind is not in a proper condition. Thus, disturbed by the bodily situation, one may not be able to remember the Supreme Lord. Maharaja Kulakshetra, Kulasekara, I apologize. Maharaja Kulasekara, a great devotee, prays, my dear Lord, just now I am quite healthy, and it's better that I die immediately so that the swan of my mind can seek entrance at the stem of your lotus feet. The metaphor is used because the swan, a bird of the water, takes pleasure in digging into the lotus flowers. Its sporting proclivity is to enter the lotus flower. Maharaja Kulashekara says to the Lord, now my mind is undisturbed and I'm quite healthy. If I die immediately thinking of your lotus feet, then I'm sure that my performance of your devotional service will become perfect. But if I have to wait for my natural death, then I do not know what will happen, because at that time, the bodily functions
Hare Krishna.
At that time, the bodily functions will be disrupted, my throat will be choked up, and I do not know whether I shall be able to chant your name. Better let me die immediately. Arjuna questions how a person can fix his mind on Krishna's lotus feet at such a time.
Thank you.
Dhanyavada.
Here further Arjuna asks three more questions. Who is the Lord of sacrifice? And then how does he live in everyone's body? And then how those who are engaged in devotional service can remember you at the time of death. So these questions constitutes these 8 items. What is Brahma? Then next is what is Atma? Then what is Karma? And what is actually material nature? Right? Adibhuta. And then Adidaiva. What are the demigods? These are the first 5 items in the previous verse. And then here, who is Adiyagya, right? Who is the Lord of the sacrifice? And then how does he live in the body? This is the 7th question. And then 8th is, how can one remember Krishna at the time of death? So in this nicely Prabhupada elaborating, all these doubts should not have arisen in Arjuna's mind, because Arjuna is already a surrendered devotee of Krishna. But here, Arjuna using the name Madhusudana is very relevant, because Arjuna, Krishna's name, Krishna has many names. One of them is Madhusudana. Madhusudana means the killer of Madhu demon. So the demons are like the doubts. The doubts are like the demons. So whenever the doubt arises, we should kill it with proper answers. So here, Arjuna is asking Krishna, Krishna, you are Madhusudana, you are expert in killing the demons. Please kill these doubts, which are like demons. So that is the significance, Prabhupada explained. And then Prayana Kale. This is the key. So they say, there's a saying, life is a preparation, death is the examination. And what is that examination? Whatever at the time of death we remember, that will become the next destination. So we can pass in the exam if at the time of death, if one can remember the Supreme Lord, he immediately comes out of the cycle of birth and death, goes back to the spiritual world. Once he attains the spiritual world, there is no more further cycle of birth and death, because that is our natural constitutional position. So that is the exam. What will be able to remember at the time of death? So that's the exam. The preparation is whatever throughout our life we do, those memories, those which are strongly impressed upon in our head, and that's what we will be remembering at the time of death. Because it is mentioned, death is a very painful event. It is mentioned that it is like 30,000 scorpions biting at the same time. Why? Because the soul is attached to the body, because it is identifying itself with the body, thinking that I am this body. And if this body is going to be taken out, it's going to be extremely distressful situation. It completely is going to get stressed out. If something which is dear to us, if it's missing, we'll be shocked. We'll be distressed like anything. For example, I'm sleeping in my house, sleeping in my apartment, right? Tonight I'm sleeping. Tomorrow when I wake up from the bed, I don't see the entire house. The entire apartment is not there. Only the bed is there. Whole apartment, the entire building vanished. What do you think I would have feel? I'll be shocked. I'll be in so much pain, right? Because I live in this house. It is my house. But when somebody is attached to the house so much, he identifies himself with the house. So when the house is taken away, he feels extremely painful. So that pain, when the soul is being separated from the body, that pain is extremely strong. When the Yamadutas, the servant of Yamaraja, comes and pulls this, when the quota is over, when the lifetime for the soul is over, right, in that particular body, they throw that pasha rope and then they pull the soul out of the body. When they do that, right, because the soul is so attached to the body, it feels so much pain. So that pain is like 30,000 scorpions biting at the same time. So at the time of even something is extremely painful, what will we remember? We will remember whatever it is very close to our heart. So The preparation, the life, time, whatever we do, whichever impresses our mind the most, and that's what we will remember at the time of death. But all those memories will nothing but simply failure in the examination. The only way to pass the exam is at the time of remembering the Lord. So that is what Arjuna is asking. How can one remember? Here Prabhupada further quotes Maharaj Kulashekara, a great devotee, in his prayers, right? The Kulashekara's prayers, very famous prayers are there. King Kulashekara's prayers in Mukundamala Stotra. Is that the death is a very painful event at the time, right? The death comes, is very painful. It's very difficult to remember anything at the time. I don't know what condition I might be. Now that my body is in the right condition, I am in a good consciousness. Now I am able to remember your lotus feet. Let me die now itself by remembering you. Why I have to wait for my end of life? Because end of life, I don't know what will happen. Like that, you are so desperate. So that is what Prabhupada elaborated here. So next verse 3, Krishna is answering the first 7 items in the next 2 verses. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Aksharam Brahma Paramam Svabhavodhyatam Uchyate Bhuta Bhavodbhava Karo Visharga Karma Samyitaha. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Aksharam, indestructible, Brahma, Brahman, Paramam, transcendental, Subhavaga, eternal nature, Adhyatmam, the self, Uchyate is called, Bhuta Bhava Udbhava Karaha, producing the material bodies of the living entities, Visargaha, creation, Karma, fruitive activities, Samyataha is called. Translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, the indestructible, transcendental, living entity is called Brahman, and his eternal nature is called Adhyatma, the self. Action pertaining to the development of material bodies of the living entities is called karma or fruitive activities. So here in this verse, Arjuna answers the first 3 items. What is Brahman? What is self, Adhyatma, and what is karma? Purport. Brahman is indestructible and eternally existing, and its constitution is not changed at any time. But beyond Brahman, there is Parabrahman. Brahman refers to the living entity, and Parabrahman refers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The constitutional position of the living entity is different from the position he takes in the material world. In the material consciousness, his nature is to try to be the lord of the matter. But in spiritual consciousness, Krishna consciousness, his position is to serve the Supreme. When the living entity is in material consciousness, he has to take on various bodies in the material world. That is called karma, or varied creation by the force of material consciousness. In the Vedic literature, the living entity is called Jivatma and Brahman, but he is never called Parabrahman. The living entity Jivatma takes different positions. Sometimes he merges into the dark material nature and identifies himself with the matter. And sometimes he identifies himself with the superior spiritual nature. Therefore, he is called the Supreme Lord's marginal energy. Tadashta Shakti. Marginal means Tadashta, the Sanskrit term. Tadashta means marginal. Sometimes it identifies with the material body, sometimes with the spiritual nature. Marginal energy. According to his identification with the material or spiritual nature, he receives a material or spiritual body. In the material nature, he may take a body from any of the 8.4 million species of life. But in the spiritual nature, he has only one body. in the material heavenly planets and in material nature, he is manifested sometimes as a man, a demigod, animal, beast, bird, etc. according to his karma. To attain material heavenly planets and enjoy their facilities, he sometimes performs yajna. But when his merit is exhausted, he returns to earth, again in the form of a man. This process is called karma. Here, Prabhupada is elaborating, right? There is a difference between Jivatma and Paramatma, Brahman and Parabrahman. The living entity is always Jivatma. It never becomes Paramatma. The living entity is always addressed as Brahman, but it never is addressed as Parabrahman. That means there are two consciousness, the supreme consciousness, which is the supreme Lord, and the individual consciousness, which are part of the Lord. So later, Arjuna, Krishna will elaborate on this topic in the 15th chapter, as well as in the 13th chapter. The 15th chapter is called Purushottama Yoga, and the 13th chapter is material nature, consciousness, and the living entity, right? All of them. At that time, Krishna will tell, in the body, there are two living entities, right? One is the Jivatma, and another is the Paramatma. So one is the local consciousness, another is the supreme consciousness. So the living entity, when misidentifies itself with the material body or material nature, it is forced to take various types of bodies. What are the bodies? There are totally 8.4 million species. Jalaja Navalakshani, Stavara Lakshavimchati, Pramayo Rutra Sankhyaga, Pakshiram Dasalakshanam, Trimcha Lakshani Pasavaga, Chadur Lakshani Manavaga. There are 9 lakh species of aquatics. There are 20 lakh Stavara Lakshavimchati, 20 lakh species of immovables, trees and plants. And then Kramayo Rudra Sankhyaga, there are 11 lakh species of insects and reptiles. And then 10 lakh species, Bakshinam Dasalakshanam, 10 lakh species of birds. Trimsha Lakshani Manavaga, 30 lakh species of 4-legged animals, Pasavaga. And then Chatur Lakshani Manavaga, 4 lakh species of humans. This constitutes 84 lakh species or 8.4 million species. These are the prototypes of different body species available in the material creation. According to his consciousness, according to his desire and what he deserves, according to his karma, he'll be forced to take a particular type of body. And this process of developing a material body for our future life is called karma. The Chandogya Upanishad describes the Vedic sacrificial process. On the sacrificial altar, 5 kinds of offerings are made into the 5 kinds of fire. The 5 kinds of fire are conceived as the heavenly planets, clouds, the earth, man and women. And the 5 kinds of sacrificial offering are faith, the enjoyer on the moon, rain, grains and semen. In the process of sacrifice, the living entity makes specific sacrifice to attain specific heavenly planets and consequently reaches them. When the merit of sacrifice is exhausted, the living entity descends to earth in the form of rain, then takes on the form of grains, and the grains are eaten by man and transformed into semen, which impregnates a woman, and thus the living entity once again attains the human form to perform sacrifice and to repeat the same cycle. In this way, the living entity perpetually comes and goes on the material path. The Krishna conscious person, however, avoids such sacrifices. He takes directly to Krishna consciousness, and therefore he prepares himself to return to Godhead. Here, Prabhupada elaborates the cycle of the living entity, how the living entity falls from the sky, from the higher planets, and then through the rain. From the rain, it enters into the seeds. From the seeds, grains. It enters into the stomach, right, of a man who eats a grain. and then from that actually gets converted into semen, and then when that semen is placed in a woman's womb, then it actually body develops for that living entity, and then he takes a human birth, then he again performs sacrifice, the cycle continues like that. This is the material activity. But a person who is actually seeking for the supreme absolute truth, he becomes Krishna conscious and he does not want any more repeated cycle of birth and death. Hence, he does not engage in this type of material sacrifices. He focuses on serving the Supreme Lord. Impersonalist commentators on Bhagavad-gita unreasonably assume that Brahman takes the form of Jiva in the material world, and to substantiate this, they refer to chapter 15, verse 7 of the Gita. But in this verse, the Lord also speaks of the living entity as eternal fragment of myself. Mamai vamso jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatanaha manashashtani indriyani prakritishtani karshati. This is the 15th chapter, 7th verse. Krishna tells that this jiva, mamai vamso jiva loke, the living entities in this material world, they are all my part and parcel. Mama amsa. Amsa means they are all part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. But, right, we are not the whole, we are all part. We are whose part? We are all Krishna's part. So that actually people, when they quote that verse, they don't quote the verse fully. If we understand the verse fully, then we understand that we are all eternal fragmental part of the Supreme. We are all eternal, but we are all parts. We are not the whole. The fragment of God, the living entity, may fall down into the material world, but the Supreme Lord Achyuta never falls down. Therefore, this assumption that the Supreme Brahman assumes the form of Jiva is not acceptable. It is important to remember that in Vedic literature, Brahman, the living entity, is distinguished from Parabrahman, the Supreme Lord. Verse 4. Adibhutam charobhavaga purushashchadi daivatam adiyagyo aham evatra deha bratam vara. Adibhutam, the physical manifestation, sharaga, constantly changing, bhavaga, nature, purushaga, the universal form, including all demigods like the sun and moon, cha, and adidaivatam, called adidaiva, adiyagyaga, the super soul, aham, I, Krishna, eva, certainly, atra, in this, dehe, body, deha bratam, of the embodied, vara, of best. Translation. O best of the embodied beings, the physical nature which is constantly changing is called Adibhuta, the material manifestation. The universal form of the Lord, which includes all the demigods, like those of the sun and moon, is called Adidaiva. And I, the Supreme Lord, represented as the super soul in the heart of every embodied being, am called Adiyagya, the Lord of sacrifice. So here Krishna further elaborates the remaining, the next 3 items. Actually, the 4 items. That what is Adibhuta, the material nature, and then what is, the universal form of the Lord, the demigod, the Adidaiva, and then what is Adiyagya, and then how does he live, right? So he lives in the region of the heart of the living entity as super soul, Adiyagya. Krishna is Adiyagya, and he lives in the living entity's heart as super soul. So this answers the next 4 items. Purport. The physical nature is constantly changing. Material bodies generally pass through 6 stages. They are born, they grow, they remain for some time, they produce some byproducts, they dwindle, and then they vanish. This physical nature is called Adibhuta. It is created at a certain point and will be annihilated at a certain point. The conception of the universal form of the Supreme Lord, which includes all the demigods and their different planets, is called Adidaivata. And present in the body, along with individual soul, is the super soul, a plenary representation of Lord Krishna. The super soul is called Paramatma or Adi Yagya and is situated in the heart. The word Eva is particularly important in the context of the verse, because by this word the Lord stresses that the Paramatma is not different from him. The super soul, the supreme personality of Godhead, seated beside the individual soul, is the witness of the individual soul's activities and is the source of the soul's various types of consciousness. Super soul gives the individual soul an opportunity to act freely and witness his activities. The function of all this different manifestation of the Supreme Lord automatically become clarified for pure Krishna conscious devotee engaged in the transcendental service to the Lord. The gigantic universal form of the Lord, called Adidaivata, is contemplated by the neophyte who cannot approach the Supreme Lord in his manifestation of super soul. The neophyte is advised to contemplate the universal form or Virata Purusha, whose legs are considered the lower planets, whose eyes are considered the sun and moon, and whose head is considered the upper planetary system. So here Prabhupada is further elaborating, right, these items. What this Adibhuta, the material nature, which goes through 6 types of transformations, and what is Adibhuta, right, which includes all the demigods and the planets, all of them form the universe. They are all part of the Virata Purusha or universal form of the Lord. And then who is Adhyagya, the super soul, who lives in living entities of everyone's heart, who is nothing but expansion of the Supreme Lord. Krishna himself is the super soul, and he exists in every living entity's heart. All of them Prabhupada nicely elaborated here in this purport. So we will stop here and then we'll continue to read from the next verse. The next question, the last question, Arjuna asks the question, how one can remember at the time of death Krishna. For that question, Krishna is going to elaborate in the upcoming verses. So we will stop here. Any comments, any questions, clarifications?
Thank you, Prabhuji. At this point, no questions, but it actually, this particular shloka differentiates Dvaita and Advaita, right?
Correct.
The two different major concepts of seeing God.
So yeah, next week we will discuss, given that you brought the topic of the Advaita and Dvaita, we will talk about how the Lord actually, the Vedas, especially the Upanishads, talks about both Dvaita and Advaita. Some people take only the Advaita and then they claim that is the ultimate truth. Some people take only the Dvaita and then they claim that is the ultimate truth. But the Lord actually harmonizes.
And some people claim Visishta Advaita too, right? There is another part.
Correct. We will talk about all of them.
Yeah, we'll talk in the next class. Thank you. Yeah, I have to be in another class.
Okay, thank you very much.
Namaste, Prabhuji. Namaste.
Namaste. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.